a rather warm Thursday morning and I thought I would use this time when the sun is on the other side of the house to film my art supply swatch log. So in my last YouTube video I discussed the process in which I have made this. I showed some time lapses of me making this and swatching all the art supply, so I thought now that it's all finished I would show you it in a little bit more detail on how I will use it as well. If you want it more on the creation of this, I will link that video below as well. Anything that I have mentioned in this video that I have swatched will also be linked below, and these will be affiliate links, so if you are going to be shopping on Amazon and using those links, I will earn a small commission. If you use those links, I will use that commission to then put back into this channel. So I will start with this. I thought I'd label this with my funky metallic stickers that I got from the charity shop. I buy quite a lot of supplies from charity shops. I've managed to find some really cool things. Recently, let me find them. I found some big paper packs for like £2 a pack, which I was thrilled with. They've got all these papers which I can also use for like my business things, like displaying earrings and whatnot, but also are very fun for the more journaling papercraft side of things. Also even found Filofaxes, so it's been very exciting when I found these in charity shops. This is a smaller size and it's my reading journal, which fills me with so much joy. I'm actually a little bit behind, so I need to fill those in, but that was very fun. And then I have my therapy journal, which is a much larger size, but I put all of my notes. I have recently finished therapy, but I'm trying to keep up to date with the tools that I used from there. So I find writing down a lot of things like brain dumps, but also discussing things that provide joy can also really help lift my mood. So I use that journal for that reason as well. So I thought I would go into this and flip through, talk about the supplies that I have swatched and how I intend to use this journal and go from there. So when opening the journal, I have my little piggy staring at me. I have two guinea pigs, if you aren't aware. This one is Gwenny, this one is Lottie. They are my little cherubs. I love them so much. So having their little faces staring at me in my journal always makes me so happy. And I have some colourful paper kind of as an inspiration, but I also can use this as backing if I feel so inclined, and also like colour themes and stuff. I then have my business cards and some paper that I tend to swatch on as well. So some thicker, some thinner, depending on what I'm swatching. I've got those handy cut up so I can add to the swatch pages, because I do intend to, as I purchase more supplies or replace supplies with other ones, I will then add to this as and when as well. So I have split these into three. I didn't want things to be too convoluted when it comes to sectioning and organisation, so I wanted to do just drawing and painting supplies. So drawing, painting, but then I also have a list at the back for more sort of use when I'm buying new art supplies and at stock. So I have my wish list, but also have the items that I am in need of replacing or have since replaced, and I have like that colour code as well, which I will show you. The kind of the easier and less intimidating it is for me to use, the more I will use it. So I don't want this to feel like a scary process for me to use, because then I'm gonna not want to use it. I want it to be joyful, sparking inspiration, that kind of thing. So the more kind of stress-free that process is, the more I'm inclined to do that. So the first art supply I swatched were the Faber-Castell Polychromos. This goes onto 2 pages, and I really enjoy these pencils. I think they're the most long-standing art supply in my collection. I use these from doing portraiture and doing tattoo flash when I was a tattoo artist. I'm also going to be discussing some of my favourite colours. So for example, on this page, Earth Green is a favourite. I love this colour. I think it's a really nice muted colour for, but slightly on the cooler spectrum. It's very unique. I also love sketching, and a technique that I was taught when I was a tattooist was using 3 colours, a light, a mid and a dark, to get the general gist down of a piece of art. So I tend to use a lighter colour, for example dark Naples yellow, and then go on to pale geranium lake to kind of consolidate the general shapes and ideas that I have. And then finally I'll use either a helio blue reddish or idanthurine blue to encapsulate the more finalised piece that I can then transfer into a sketchbook or on my iPad to then work on the final piece of artwork. On the continued Faber-Castells, I think my favourite shades on here is Cinnamon. Really lovely shade for flowers. It's like a really neutral muted pink, but it's also a really nice lip colour on pale complexions. I also really like the cobalt green. It gives a sort of tropical ocean feels, which I really like. I should also mention that I really like Caput Mortem and Nugget. Those are my two favourite colours, I think, as well when it comes to portraiture. It's almost like a muted Perylene Violet and then an even more muted, more grey tone brown. These work beautifully for portraiture. I then move on to my Derwent collection. So I have the Colour Soft, which I think are more comparable to the Faber-Castell Polychromos. The Polychromos are quite waxy in consistency, so I tend to use these last when it comes to doing the pencil work. Because of that waxiness, I find them a little bit less sort of blendable. Derwent have a burnisher and blender mix, which is a little bit like a more compressed one of these, which do blend them really, really well. But this is more for like slightly powdery, I think, pencils, which work better. So I would say the Faber-Castell is probably the waxier sort of consistency of pencil crayon. Still not as much as, say, a pastel. They just have a bit of an oilier feel, if that makes any sense. And they have a sheen to them, whereas I think the Derwent Colour Softs are a little bit less of the, I think the Colour Softs and the drawing are slightly similar in consistency. The Colour Soft aren't quite as saturated, you can blend and build a lot more, whereas I think the drawing pencils are a lot thicker and creamier. They have like a robustness to them, which is lovely to use. And in terms of the colours of these, I find Blush Pink is a really fantastic dupe for the Caran d'Ache Luminance Anthracenoid Pink. Obviously the Luminance is definitely more of a luxe formula, and you pay for that formula with it being the Luminance. Its light fastness is excellent, but if you're wanting a cheap alternative, the Blush Pink from Derwent Colour Soft is fantastic. As for the drawing pencils, these are some of my favourite pencils. Like I said, they have that creaminess and they just are so rich. They have a decadence to them, which I love. Speaking of decadence, the chocolate shade is a gorgeous, really deep, almost sepia. It reminds me of like compost earth sort of feel. So really, really lovely colour. I also use pale cedar and Mars Violet quite a lot as well. Mars Violet and Grey Lavender are very similar again. If you're wanting that more sort of, like I said, thick, creamy consistency, the Mars Violet might work better. If you're wanting something a bit more, say, versatile, depending on what you want to use it for, the Grey Lavender from Derwent Colour Soft might be excellent for that. The more, say, luxe formulas are the Derwent Lightfast and the Caran d'Ache Luminance. I would say these are comparable, but then also different in their own way. The Derwent Lightfast have a bit more of a texture to them, I'd say. They have a bit of a grit to them, so they work really well on cold pressed paper because they add to that texture. Anything more, say, botanical, earthy, these work perfectly for. At least I prefer them for things like that. If you're wanting something smoother, a lot more vibrant in, say, and how easy the vibrance gets to that colour, it doesn't take a lot to kind of really get that full opacity. These work really well. For portraiture, these are probably my preferred because of that blendability and that smoothness. You can really get the gradient of the skin contours and stuff, and they have a really wide range of colours from the more, say, warm greys, which work well for a certain undertone, to even like the middle verdigris works really well for like a base for different undertones as well. They work wonderfully. I would say the greens in the Derwent Lightfast are more a vaster sort of range. These ones are nice, there's just not as much, say, difference, whereas I really like how you have things like foliage, which is more of like an olive, like a light sap green, but then you have like racing green, which is really deep, mallard green, which a really sort of vibrant teal almost, whereas I think the greens, there's a lot more shades as well. I don't have all of them obviously, but I think when it comes to like neutrals, these are wonderful. They do have a lovely range, both of them, of brights as well, but in terms of what you're looking for, at least again just my opinion and how I use them, the Derwent Lightfast I prefer for anything that's more botanical and anything that you can have a bit more texture and grit to. Also mixed media, it's really fun to add that texture. Whereas I think the Caran d'Ache Luminance is definitely more versatile depending on what surface you use it on. It adapts to quite a lot. They are definitely really enjoyable to use because of that smoothness. They feel luxury when you use them. You can definitely see the difference when you use these compared to some other pencils. But again, I really enjoy both of these for the quality. You get what you pay for. They are slightly more on the expensive side. I say slightly, very much more on the expensive side, but they are an absolute joy to use. The next supply are my Caran d'Ache Neo colours, which are like big chunky wax, almost adult wax crayons. That's how I like to use them. They're obviously far more professional than that, but I find they definitely tickle that part of my brain that is the inner child that likes to still colour in with big chunky crayons, and these do just that. The Neo colour ones are not water soluble, so I like to use these more like a final step, add a bit of a playful scribbliness to a piece, and these work well for that. I like the deeper tones like the light olive and ochre more for things that I'm like for that scribbliness. I initially bought things like Sahara yellow and pink in this range because I wasn't as clued up, I say, with the formulas. I didn't really know much of the difference of how I wanted to use them. I wasn't familiar with that. But then I like all these bright sort of paler tones more in this water soluble variety, because I can initially apply a layer, add some water, play around with where I want the saturated bits to be, and blend it with other colours. These have that sort of adaptability to that, and they just have that creaminess to them, which I find really enjoyable to use for that reason. These colours together here are really inspiring me. In fact, just looking at all of these colours in this art log definitely inspires me. I also really like these neutrals, like beige is a really nice colour, especially for portraiture. Getting like a thick sort of crayon-esque layer can really make things look more mixed media in my artwork, which I really like, that sort of really seeing how the art supplies work together. I like seeing the layers. I like kind of sticking to seeing, I don't want everything to be so blended that you can't tell what supplies are used. I quite like seeing the brush strokes and the scribbly lines. I really enjoy that aspect because it does kind of provide that playfulness, which I love in art. We then have my alcohol markers, which are my Copics. I initially bought some sketch markers because I was told that they were better, and they are also a lot more expensive. So then I discovered the Chow markers. I was initially, in tattooing and things, I used my Pro markers, which were originally Letraset, and then moved to the, I think, Winsor & Newton brand. But I used the Pro markers for years and years and years, and then when most of those ran out and I was more into the sort of painting aspect, I hadn't used them. I stopped using them. So then I bought a few more alcohol markers to get back into that because I love using them for portraiture. I think I predominantly use my alcohol markers for portraiture. They're a really good base layer and a good way of kind of consolidating the general idea of the face, getting those contours right, getting all the kind of the chiseled definition that you want, and then blending out with the paler shades. I love using these for that. They definitely work really well for portraiture, I find. But I also have some brighter colours as well because they're a great way to adding undertones and then adding your browns over the top. But also if I was doing, say, flowers in the hair, or I don't know, a outfit that the person was wearing, these work quite well to have as well. I really enjoy using the shade Putty and Barley Beige for complexions. Lionette Gold is a great way of adding a olive skin tone. I also really love Champagne and Baby Blossoms, adds a bit more of coolness, also works really well for lips and blush and contours of the nose, things like that. Dark Bark is a gorgeous deep brown, but still definitely brown. It's not too close to a black or a dark grey. I really enjoy using that. I do have quite a lot of these salmony colours. I think in hindsight I don't need them all, but again, I think the type of medium that they are, it's hard to be able to tell how they turn out. So I think if these ran out, I wouldn't necessarily repurchase those. I'd stick to probably my favourite ones, or find out which one is my favourite and use them, and then replenish that one instead. Because I don't think I need all of those, but again, the colours do look different online sometimes, so you presume one of them is slightly more muted, one of them is slightly deeper, and they do all look very much like a prawn pink sort of colour. Next are my Tombow ABT markers. I use these for a lot of different purposes. I probably use them the most in terms of all of my supplies, along with the Posca markers, which I will show you later. I think my most used colours of these would be the Pale Cherry, Asparagus, Periwinkle, Light Olive, and also my Alice Blue. I think I will definitely repurchase the Alice Blue because that one was looking rather dry when I last used it. But these are all really lovely colours, and I really enjoy the fact that one of them is a finer tip, so I can draw more with those. And then the brush tip is definitely more of the sort of mark making, getting the a wider amount of colour on. They are also water soluble as well, but I prefer to use them more within that opaque format because mixing them with water, especially in a sketchbook, does make them more prone to bleeding. I think it's because I'm quite heavy-handed with water and watercolours. I forget that these work a little bit differently and are a bit more, require a bit more finesse, of which I lack in because I am a little bit slapdash. I'm just naturally more heavy-handed with things. I have my Eco Line brush pens from Talons. A lot of these are more of the portraiture colours because I use these as a good base coat for that. These are different to the alcohol markers because they don't necessarily bleed through. I find alcohol markers definitely bleed through more on a sketchbook, so I tend to use those more for my original portraits, like my Alexander Hamilton. It's been 10 years since Hamilton, so I did my Alexander Hamilton portrait and definitely used more of the Copic markers because it was on its own piece of paper. If I wanted to do something similar but in my sketchbook, I would use these because of that formula difference. I also have my Liquitex acrylic markers, which I believe I have actually not written the names. This is unbleached titanium, parchment, and light pink. I find my unbleached titanium was maybe a bit of a bad one. It's quite lumpy and separated. I've tried mixing it. It's not been that's the problem. It just separates a bit more. I'd like to know if other people have had this problem because these two seemed fine, but I don't know. I do like these though, as the Posca markers can definitely be more on the brighter side and less on the neutral side. So having these either to mix, these work quite well for that. We then have my Posca acrylic markers, which I think are some of my most used supplies, similar to the Tombows and my pencils. I do have most of the colours because I do use these so much. And then similar to the Posca acrylic markers are the Molotow acrylic markers, which again, I think I use probably as much. There are some kind of crossover colours, some colours that are very different. There's a colour from the Molotow that I'd like to get again because I used all of mine up. I thought I had another one and I don't. And it's it's called Lobster. It's like a really gorgeous terracotta colour, which I just haven't got in this variety. Molotows definitely have more of a unique colour scheme. The pastels are definitely more on the muted side, but for your standard colours, the Poscas, I like the formula a bit better. They don't water down as much. I find the Molotows, if you've left them for a while, take a lot of mixing and they can go quite separated, whereas the Poscas, for the most part, because I use them so much at least, I've not had any trouble with that separation aspect. I do use different nibs of these. I thought I'd write those down so I could kind of log what I have, but for the most part, no. For example, I know that these are colours that only are done in the 3M variety, and these are, I tried to mark that because they're a smaller square, they are the finest 1MR variety. But for the most part, I use 3Ms or 5Ms, and anything that I tend to use for like outlines, like the blue, I do tend to have a 1MR, which is the fine line nib as well. And finally, I have had to add some tape on these because they are a bit more smeary. These are my Sennelier oil pastels. I've really gotten into these. However, I do want to start looking into trying to maybe get a fixative because I love how these look. I'd love to use them in my sketchbook, but they do just smear all over the place. Same with, I want to use them on my canvas paintings, but again, the smearing, I want them to stay as permanent and stand the test of time. But again, I love that sort of scribbly playfulness. The textures of those are just absolutely gorgeous. So I do want to discover that. I know Sennelier do their own fixative, but it's rather on the pricier side, that if it doesn't necessarily work, which I presume with it being the brand of the oil pastels that it would, but I don't know. I think for an aerosol, I don't know, I'm not sure if it's something that I want to commit to just yet, but if it does make this aspect a lot easier, I think it'll be worth it. I do love this Cinnabar Yellow Brown. The coral is definitely more on the transparent side, but again, really lovely for like a hint of colour. The greys I think are very interesting, although the English grey definitely looks more blue. That is a slight regret because it's definitely more blue, but the yellow grey in the bullet doesn't look very grey, like yellow grey at all. But then as I blended it, you really do see almost like an ochre come through, which I thought was really fascinating. But this is definitely a supply I want to work and become more familiar with. I love these neutrals as well, like Mummy and Violet Grey. I love anything like that. Now onto the painting supplies. I have a blank piece of paper here, which will probably go onto a supply that I am yet to purchase, but will fill up eventually. I will add more pieces of paper as and when I buy more art supplies. I tend to buy my refills from either Amazon or eBay or something like that. These are either dot grid or square grid, and these are A5 6 ring. I really enjoy these. I prefer these to say lines and stuff. I find they look a little bit more artsy or fun with stickers. They have the lines so I can keep things relatively organised. The first page are my handmade watercolours. These are from Aqua Bloom. I got these for Christmas, I think, for my mother one year, and then my Beyond Indigos, which I really enjoy. I do believe the shop's on a slight hiatus, which is such a shame because their colours are sublime and I'd love to get some more at some point. I hope they come back soon because their paints are some of my favourites. They have, some of them granulate really beautifully, some of them are definitely more smooth. They have a lovely smell to them. I think it's clove. They're just gorgeous. These definitely have more of like a opaque gouache feel to them. I think the handmade watercolours definitely have a different feel to them. I like to think it's because they are made with love, but it's probably also the ingredients compared to the other watercolours that you can get from the mainstream brands. But I think it's the love that changes the formula, and I'm going to stick to that because it makes me feel very whimsical. However, the colours that I like to use in this are Purple Ash. I love this eucalyptus shade, and Putty and Peach Haze are great for a portraiture. Clementine is really unique. It has like a vibrance through it and it granulates, but like still relatively opaque, but it has this almost yellow feel to it that comes through. Gorgeous. Basil is definitely more sheer, but really lovely. Definitely reminds me of a basil leaf. We then have my pride and joy, my Schminker super granulating watercolours. I adore these. They look like little pebbles, little gemstones. I cannot rave about these enough. They are pricier. However, using these in my paintings and in my sketchbook provides such a different effect. Like, I've not found things similar in my collection at all. And I think Schminker do granulation how I prefer my granulating paints to look. I like the Daniel Smith granulating, but I feel like, I don't know, I think because I'm a bit of a colour fiend, I like when they have all different colours within. For example, like Desert Green has like a rich carmine feel to it that comes through. Glacier Green has like Potter's Pink through it. Shy Yellow has like a lavender that comes through it. They're just all gorgeous. They're works of art within themselves. I just adore them. They also do them in half pans now as well, so that's great for if you don't want to buy a large 15mm tube, which are definitely on the pricier side. They do small 5mm. I believe I replenished my Shy Yellow recently with a 5mm and it was perfect. But they also do like half pans, like I said, which are definitely great if you have a palette that you want to fill and don't have the mini pans. I then have my general watercolours, which, look at that page. Does that not just fill you with joy? I'm so proud because they managed to all fit. I didn't plan this through because I think I would have been really annoyed if there was just one or two left. This was completely accidental, but it worked. I even have space for a couple of others. It was thrilling. I will be honest, when it got to about here, I was thinking, are the others going to fit? And they did, and I felt a little bit smug. Some colours I adore the most would be my Roman Schmall Aquarius Green. I also love my Winsor & Newton Van Dyke Brown, my Old Holland Brilliant Pink. I also adore my Sennelier Grey and Sennelier Warm Grey. Neutral tint is a great way to add depth, but it's not black. Like I was saying with the Daniel Smith granulation, these definitely just feel like they're interesting, don't get me wrong, but I prefer the granulation to be more colours than, say, separation. And I feel like I've got a good mix, and then I think mixing with these as well and my handmaids, I feel like I've got a lot of bases covered. I then have my Holbein acrylic gouache. I thought I'd be safe and save some room in case I have more watercolours that eventually get purchased, hence the fact I left space here as well for other things. I don't want to ruin my aesthetic, but also my hours of working on this to then need more space because I have no more room to add just one little paint. So I wanted to keep that in mind when creating this. So even if that looks a little bit strange, as it fills, it'll all make a bit more sense. But these are my Holbein acrylic gouaches. I love my gouache. I think they are very similar to the Schminker. Holbein do gouaches so well. I definitely use my Turners as well, and I enjoy those in a different way. I love the colours. I love the pinks, the pastels of the acrylic gouaches from Holbein are gorgeous. The deep colours I've got as well, I think they do a lot better than say the Turner. I think I find the Turner ones have a bit more separation to them, which is fine because I can just mix them. But I think the Holbein sort of bright colours, like look at that, that doesn't even translate on camera how neon the opera colour is. I think my most used colours in these would be the Horizon Blue and the Cosmos Pink. I love the deep yellow and the ice green. Pale lilac is gorgeous as well. The misty colours are really nice. Misty green is great for portraiture. And I think my favourite lilac of any art supply would definitely be the Holbein acrylic gouache. I am yet to find a lilac that to me screams lilac. There's a lavender, there's, you know, other sort of purple hues, but I feel like if I'm thinking of lilac and I want lilac in a painting, that is the colour that I want, and it never misses. It's always fantastic. I then have my Turner acrylic gouaches. I think the Turner gouaches are best for their greyish colours and more on the neutral sides. So they're greyish blues, greyish greens, greyish beige. All of these are done so well. I love the red ochre. I actually have a big red ochre because I love it so much. The next are acrylic inks, and these are my Daler-Rowney FW acrylic inks and my Daler-Rowney System 3. I have also swatched my Vallejo Artist Colour acrylic paints, which I love. They're definitely more of like a shiny paint, which I really like. If I'm going to go for like more of a faux impasto feel, these work so well. They are a little bit stickier on these, so they do tend to stick to each other. They are dry, but they just have like a, I don't know, like a plasticky polymer feel to them. But my acrylic inks are lovely. Again, I use these similar to watercolours, but because they're acrylic, they don't budge after setting. So if I'm doing a botanical piece, the sap green and olive green are great. Same with mixing peach pink or antelope brown or red earth to get like the general gist of where I want a face to go, but I don't want it to mix with the greens. These work wonderfully as well. That Indian yellow is just joyful to me. I think that yellow is probably my favourite shade of yellow. It reminds me of like dandelions when they are in bloom. And my fluorescent colours, which I really enjoy using those as like bases. I think I saw it was either Paloma the Peach or I'm trying to think now, Apple Cheeks. I think they added like a fluorescent red as like an underpainting, or it might have been, oh I can't think now. I'm sure it was Paloma the Peach. They added like the fluorescent red and then added like a turquoise over the top, and when there were bits that were kind of more transparent and sheer and that like red showed through, oh it made my little brain just explode with joy. I loved it. I thought it looked so good. I then have my other acrylic paints, my Winsor & Newton Galleria. These are probably my most used because they are inexpensive, so when I am replenishing, I'm not having to break the bank because I do use my acrylic paints quite a lot. But if I'm wanting a larger size and a bit more of like a unique colour story, the Talons Amsterdam are becoming more and more of a favourite every time I use them. I think I use the darker tones in these and the more sort of staple colours of these. However, I do also love Buff Titanium and Pale Rose Blush for colours like flowers and things. The Pale Umber works really well for muting any other colour. It has like a lilac-y hue, makes things look a little bit murky, but again, love that. Same with the Green Gold, very transparent. And you can see here, as you blend it out, it becomes more like a musty colour, but again, lay it on thickly, it does appear more of like an olive colour. The Opera Rose again looks more red on camera, but it is really, really bright. It actually makes me feel like I need to wear glasses. As for more custom sort of paler colours, the Amsterdams are great, and you get a lot more in a tube. I think it's 120ml that you can get in these tubes, which definitely last a lot longer, which for me is perfect because I tend to use my acrylic paints the most, like I said. I think my favourite colours of these are the warm grey, the Caput Morton Violet, which is definitely more of a transparent colour, and the Naples Yellow Green works so well for like highlights in leaves, because it's not, I wouldn't say it's as like say neon as like pale lemon, and the white definitely sometimes looks a bit too and it has like a falseness to it, which sometimes I quite enjoy, like sparkles and things. But if I want things to look more on the sort of natural feel, this works so well. You can see the difference, even just the Naples yellow light and the Naples yellow green. It just has that sort of earthiness to it, which I adore. And that's the end of the art supplies. Finally, we have the stock. So this is my wish list. I have a little sticker that I will add when I have purchased it. It's a little yellow sticker. These are just some of the things that I think are definitely on my mind, the fixative being one of them. These aren't necessarily things I will buy, it's just things that if, say, I'm looking for a colour, these ones I have written down, so it just makes deciding things a little bit easier because I know what I've written down already. More continued with the wish list, and then some empties. I needed a new Opera Rose. I went to the range, they had it, so I repurchased it, hence the blue sticker. And then the Holbein acrylic wash in Jaune Brilliant and Shell Pink. I finished both of those up. I think there's no more left in this tube now. I've tried to get as much out as possible, and it's just very dry at the lid. But I think I bought my Naples yellow red from Amsterdam to replenish that. So I haven't necessarily repurchased it, but I'm wanting the more, say, gouache texture instead of the acrylic paint. I would say these definitely have a more matte feel than, say, the Galleria and the Vallejo. So they kind of can get a bit gouache, especially the pastel colours. Definitely less thick in that sense, but they are also definitely the most opaque. I don't have to apply much to get that sort of impactful colour, all except the Caput Mortuum Violet, which is definitely more transparent. That is my art supply log. I would encourage anyone who uses a lot of art supplies or does a lot of sort of mixed media to have a go at this. It's very fun. You don't need to add stickers, you don't need to add things to be as kind of maximalist as mine. You could even go more maximalist with little pop-ups and tip-ins and stuff. You could have it in a book instead of a binder form. Go for it. It is very fun, and I think seeing everything out like this, making colour schemes, I think is really useful as a tool, and it's also been a really fun project to do, and I think just looking at this is also massively satisfying. But yes, that is the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video or like me, please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you here and join me in all of my arty endeavours. Along with any of the journaling shops that I have mentioned, I will also link those below, because I think journaling shops are sometimes hard to come by. You can go to places like the Range and Hobbycraft, which are fantastic, but if you haven't got anywhere to necessarily go, there's sometimes so much out there, it's hard to kind of know where to start. So I thought I would link a couple of those as well to make life a little bit easier. And I will also link all of my stuff as well. So my Instagram, my Etsy shop, where I've been making lots of earrings. I've actually just made these this morning because it was too hot and I couldn't sleep. So I decided to have a go at my bouquet collection that I want to make. So we have little daisy bouquets. So that's a sneaky peek just for you. Yes, I hope this was enjoyable for you to watch. If you are inspired to make your own art supply log, I would love to see them. They are so satisfying. Seeing all of the colours in such an organised way and just how people like to display things like that makes me so happy. So I'd love to know what you do within this sort of format, and I encourage everyone to do one. It's very fun. But I really hope you have a truly magical rest of your day. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.